So I was thinking about the post office and the idea of like postmarks. Like, that's significant media technology. Before the postal system existed, I had to walk to you to hand you a letter. Most of the mail that I get is marketing materials.
Almost all of it. Yeah, interesting point. Huh. That's funny.
Like what?
There's something really interesting in that point that you make, right? All of my mail is marketing mail. And if something comes from a place that's important to me, like my bank, I know something's wrong, right? Something broke or someone's in trouble.
Right.
I missed a bill.
Hey, everybody. It's the Data-Driven Marketer. I'm Adam.
I'm Brian.
Welcome back for another hang in the Data Lab, talking about marketing in the digital age. What are we talking about this week?
We're talking about the history and the purpose and the development and the launch of NetWise's new audience platform.
Right. So we are a sponsored podcast, right? Our podcast doesn't get to exist without NetWise, a company, believing that this media should exist, right? Like on some level, we've got to do what's called talking our own book, which is we have a product. It pays for this podcast, among many other things. We're going to talk about it today. Most of the rest of this podcast will be conversations with people and like talking about the ecosystem and the practice of data-driven marketing. But first, we got to talk about.
I think it's hugely important to own that, right? We're a podcast about marketing, and so hopefully marketers will be listening. And let's be straightforward, right? We have a product that's for marketers. That's why we're doing a podcast for marketers. And I agree that our content pipeline for this podcast is really, really interesting. I'm super excited to bring all the conversations we've been talking about to this to our listeners, and to go deep into a lot of the areas that our business has really become experts in. Revealing the technology behind being a data-driven marketer in a way I don't think people will have heard before, unless they work with us already. But in all of those, in our transparency, right, at some point we're going to want to tie that back to our products and services, which in this case, this episode is really kind of revealing that in a whole, so you have some context in the future, so you can kind of intuit as you're listening to these deeper dives with other companies and other guests about how our products tie in there, how our technology works, how the industry ties together, and why we know about it, why we're talking about it, why it's important. So this one is a bit of is shill the right term?
Absolutely, shill or be shilled, sir. The purpose of this episode is to direct people back to everywhere else that we have to mention the platform, so they understand what's going on here, so that I don't have to shill it constantly in the same way in future conversations. From here on out, it'll probably look a lot more like sponsored by NetWise, and like that'll be it, right?
And I think we're gonna have like interesting series too. This is gonna be presented a little differently than kind of your standard stream. You'll be able to go look up like, oh, let's go listen to the series on blah blah blah.
No, the point. Well, so I think that's a good segue into the next piece, where I think the first thing we got to talk about before we talk about the platform is what is NetWise. We kind of talked about functionally like what the company does in the first episode. This is more like the mission as a company at the seam of how all this stuff works, and as people who are trying to both grow digital marketing, but also facilitate the use of tools like ours and everything that exists in the ecosystem of digital marketing. We care as much about the idea that this stuff should be data-driven and sort of approached scientifically. And to that end, teaching other people how to do it is really helpful, right? So one aspect of the NetWise mission is it's not necessarily about, sales wants people to use the platform, but we want the people that use the platform to be as successful as possible. And part of that is about actually creating more sophisticated marketers out there in the world who understand the approach that the platform really is rocket fuel for,
right?
Ultimately. So I guess talk about that part a bit, because I did some exploration when I got here into the mission, but you've been at it for 5 years and basically explained to me what you wanted the mission to be.
I mean, you did a great job coming in and helping to wrangle that, right? Because my experience with mission statements, mission concepts, right, capturing like the heart of a business or an organization, it's really hard to do internally, right? You get caught up in your own little piece of the business or the community or what you're in charge of or the wrong aspects of the business. So our mission has always been to empower B2B marketers, right? Over the years, what that has turned into, because of kind of the offerings we have, the products we have, we tend to be empowering sophisticated teams, and that's partly because we've always historically our products have been they've been most accessible to marketing teams that have capital behind them. They have a diverse team. They've got not only marketers, campaign managers, media creators, right? But they've got a data science team. They've got analysts. They are data-driven marketers already. And that's because our products have been large and complex. They're technical, right? We offer data sets, we license databases. We offer technical integrations into MarTech in ways that are complex, right? You have to have a technical understanding to even know you want to ask for these things a lot of the time. So that's where we've come from as a business. And over the years, even with those really sophisticated customers, there have been dozens of things that come up all the time that they need help with. Subtleties to how technologies work in the space and how data moves around and how you target audiences and how you get campaigns out and how you run ads, that you kind of need like a tech consultant and like a MarTech consultant.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's an interesting, coming from the marketing side of it rather than the engineering side. There's a very distinct people within your company or clients or whoever will come to you and say, okay, here's the campaign we want to do. And then you kind of have to you have to compare that against the constraints of the technological system that they're asking you to use to do that. And then you kind of have to go back and go, that's not exactly how targeting for that would work, but here's the approximation that I can give you. And in a lot of cases, that's even more powerful than their initial idea of like, we're going to send a mailer out to whoever.
Totally.
And you're like, well, what if we use Facebook, but it should look like this?
Yeah.
instead?
And to be really clear, we're not like an advertising agency at all. Don't mix us up with that. People, and I think we're constantly kind of curating our language on our website to make sure that's clear, because people think that still sometimes. But and we're not like creating content. We're not a consultancy, right? We're an information company. We make information about businesses available for marketing. And what's interesting is, until you start to uncover how complex the technologies are that are behind the scenes in the industry, and everyone knows they're complicated, right? We all know it's big news these days, right? That all the tech companies are actually advertising companies. But that revelation pulls the curtain back, and all of a sudden you see the machine, and the machine is wildly complex, right? It's some of the
so complicated.
It's many of the greatest engineering minds of our time right now inventing this stuff over the last 15, 20 years. So the way it works and the way it affects the creative aspect of campaigns, and even the like data-driven aspect of campaigns, right? The how you target and where you target and channels that are accessible to you, knowing how it's functionally working drives how you want to make your campaigns, right? Because it's not, with all the technology in place, all the platforms and the way that information flows between them, it's not about just the person anymore. It's about how the information comes from these platforms, how you can get information into those platforms, how people interact with those platforms and how they behave differently on there, and how like technical integrations, how API integrations actually like change behavior and change analytics, right? So there's just layers and layers of technical complexity that, when you understand a lot of it, you can layer that into your campaign concepts in really smart ways. So it's always surprising to me how many customers want that information, right? That's part of why we're starting this podcast, right? Is because we have these conversations over and over again. I'm always like, I can't believe you want to know this technical aspect of this, but I think marketers are so technically savvy these days, right? A lot of them have a lot of engineering skills, right? Advanced Excel skills, programming skills. They can write SQL. They can interact with databases, right? They're doing advanced statistical modeling. So mad respect for people in marketing today from like a scientific and engineering perspective, right? It's super relevant. And so the more you understand this stuff, just the better you're going to be.
So we covered this a bit in the last episode, but we should hit it for a minute here. The history of NetWise ultimately is, we have been a supplier of data to a lot of companies in this space that help data-driven marketers do different things in terms of, understanding who your audience is and getting, your message to them ultimately. How did that get us to the platform, which is ultimately the product we're here to promote?
So
the NetWise audience data B2B audience data platform.
Oh man, boy, was it a long journey to go from trying to name that to just choosing a descriptive name that's really long and boring.
Yeah,
but right. So the story is actually pretty interesting. I mean, like I was describing, our historically, our business has served large, well-capitalized, sophisticated marketing teams at big companies, partly just because of the technical sophistication you need to license a big database and leverage big data. That is changing a little bit. More and more teams are getting sophisticated. More and more teams have technical capabilities. More and more companies have engineers and analysts and data scientists. Still not a ton though, right? Like the average company, the average mid-market company, however you picture that in your head, it doesn't matter. The average company doesn't have that capacity. So what happened with us internally actually is as we've scaled the company, we just didn't have capacity for engineering to directly support all of our big customers anymore. And a lot of the stuff we were doing was our product was mature enough, right? What we sell in the market and how we sell it and how people use it is mature enough that we could standardize the processes. And so the engineering team, 2 years ago almost now, built a platform internally that was for our operations team to handle fulfillment for a lot of our customers, right? Manage audience exploration and creating files for them and delivery of product in timely manners when deliveries are due contractually. And as soon as engineering gave that product to the team, because we kind of did it in the dark. It was sort of like almost a hackathon project that we did for a few months behind the scenes. And as soon as we showed that to ops, sales sniffed it out and was like, we're going to start selling this. So it kind of just became a tool we built to support our customers, to support our large, sophisticated customers, has become a tool that enables every company to use our platform and get the value that a lot of our big companies need those expensive teams to handle.
So, it's as anyone in it's so basically maybe this is a funny way to talk about it. When I first got in, when you guys first brought me in to do the comms stuff, the platform had like three. You already alluded to it. The platform had like 3 different names internally, and it was one of those things where it was very clear the genesis of what is now the platform product. In a really compelling way. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that VCs drool over, which is essentially like, we had an internal problem we needed to solve. We solved it for ourselves, and our customers turned out to love it, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it really is what's happening. The funny thing is now some people call it the platform, some people call it the UI, some people call it and the UI is like the earliest name. That was literally like you guys just saying, that's an engineered term for like, can you give me more friendly buttons to interact with this giant database? Because I don't, it doesn't even, if you've worked in any kind of back end stuff like server maintenance, everything's super ugly because no one cares. The engineers don't care. They just want to click the button to solve the problem and move on.
We had a really good branded name for this for a while that everyone was really excited for and behind, and the domain was available and we were going to get it. And I didn't spend $500 on it or something because I wanted to be like, are we sure we want to spend $500 on this domain? And I guess we all went to the domain, and like when I went to buy it the next week, it was like $8,000, and it bounced between like 9 different domain owners.
I'm pretty sure there's a traffic sensing algorithm that bumps domain names dynamically based on interest level.
But then we got really pissed off, and we're like, we're not going to buy a domain for that much money for something we just made up. So now we have a long descriptive product name.
But the event that brings the conversation to you today is ultimately at the end of 2 years of production and, busting your ass on this kind of stuff. We are getting ready to drop what we're calling version 2.0 of the platform, but this is it, right? This is the one where it's like you sat down at the beginning of designing this version of software and said, okay, how do we make this work for the next 50,000 companies, past the Fortune 500s that we've been working with for 10 years? Why? Well, I think let's start here with it. Give me an example of like how somebody would use the platform.
Yeah, totally. So in its simplest form, the platform is specifically designed for you to build marketing campaign audiences, right? To target businesses that you want to sell your products to. So for us, right, we're interested in broadly, we're interested in marketers at businesses. And as you start to talk through that, right, as you start to talk through marketing concepts like your ideal customer profile, your buying personas, your decision committee at your customers, industries you service, technographics, firmographics about businesses that are like relevant to your sales process, what you've seen, who you've sold to, you can target all that stuff in our platform. So it really is, it's like a really nice web interface that gives you access to an extraordinarily sophisticated business database and the people that work at those businesses. So you can really put together your marketing campaigns very strategically, very specifically, and essentially have the power of all of domestic U.S. business data at your fingertips in a way that's built for a marketer's workflow, right? The idea of managing personas in a platform and managing company lists and going to market inside of a social media platform and programmatic ads and digital ads and email and your sales team. So it's a really powerful utility that kind of merges the effect you'd get from having an engineering team with a big data set, a data science team that can analyze it, an analysis team, an analytics team that helps you figure out the targeting, and then the person who's actually executing ad campaigns. It's not media, it's not creative, it's not the creative aspect of it, but it's all the targeting components of it. So it's really powerful for that, for exploring your market and understanding how you want to reach people, who you're going to reach, and at what companies.
Well, and I think this brings us back to the data-driven marketer piece of it, which is why you gave a great answer in a conversation the other day for this one. But like, why is this a game changer? Basically, like, why are we excited as marketers about this platform existing so we can use it and continue to tell you about it?
I'm real curious what my great answer was the other day, so I hope I give it again. There are a lot of platforms built for marketers already. What there aren't are a lot of data platforms built for marketers. If you think through, if you're familiar with a product like ZoomInfo, which a lot of people are, big public company, it's been in the news a ton in the last couple of years, that whole interface is built for a sales team. The concept behind that is really for your sales team to go in there and be able to prospect and say, hey, I want to reach somebody at this company that I'm trying to get to. I need to know who the CFO is. They can look somebody up, they pull some data out. It's got a lot more sophistication than that. And I don't mean to sell it short like that, but from a data perspective, it's not built for a marketer's workflow. It's not built from the perspective of reaching audiences and reaching whole markets and reaching whole companies. Whereas our platform, what's really exciting about it is the technical innovations in it, the ways that we make a marketer's life easy. The person who's running campaigns, who's responsible for segmenting out how you're going to target across multiple different advertising channels, multi-channel marketing, there's a lot of heavy data lifting. There's a lot of Excel work that you end up doing, separating lists out and giving them to different salespeople and different teams and to your email, your ISP, and there's a lot of data wrangling, and this platform helps you do that more efficiently. It helps you do it more cleanly. It gives you more insights into what you're doing. It's more fun to use than just sharing Excel files around work.
That's the right answer, but it's not the one you gave the other day. The other day you said that for you, what this platform enables ultimately and what our end goal as we iterate with it is really to fulfill the promise for data nerds and elder millennials like you and me. It fulfills the promise of digital marketing ultimately. You can do a lot of tests through our platform where you don't have to just kind of like black box blindly bump your way through. You can run iterations and tests and be scientific without the load of having to go pay for a giant ad buy and then get incoming data, which is why you've needed a budget and such a sophisticated team in the past.
It's a great point, and I'm glad I gave that answer the other day too. I'll expand on it a little bit. The concept of multi-channel marketing right now is fairly segmented technologically. It's hard to know that you're targeting the same people places, right? Because for the most part, you're stuck using other people's information. So if you're trying to advertise on Facebook, you're using Facebook's demographic information. If you're trying to advertise on Google, you're using targeting information available in there. If you're trying to run ads in programmatic, right, you're using targeting information which is in the programmatic ecosystem, which is actually where we got started. But what has always bugged me there is you can't customize anything, and there's zero transparency into what is in those audiences. So people are spending astronomical amounts of money. We all know how much money moves around the advertising space these days. And so to not really have the analytic capability to understand who you're targeting and then to be able to target the same people everywhere, it just seems ridiculous, right? The like you said, the promise of digital advertising is it's analytics driven, right? It's data driven marketing, and our platform and access to US business data in aggregate at full to be able to really understand your campaigns and run tests and know that when you push an audience to Facebook and then go target the same audience in programmatic, you're reaching the same people. It lets you be data driven, right? It's not comparable to run campaigns in multi-channels and then compare them when you have no idea what the data sources are that you're running against. So this is really powerful. And to be very clear, the multi-channel part is very unique to our business. That's part of our tech IP that's not available very many other places. And so the ability to target the same audiences multiple places and then to do it with such ease on our platform is really, really unique. And what is really exciting.
Well, and that kind of gets to another specific thing that we talk about a lot in the context of the platform, which is if you already have data, a list of users or, whatever, users for your product, you can import that into the platform and then automatically append all of the data that we have on that thing. So essentially fatten your own file.
Totally.
By attaching.
Exactly. And so that's where you start to touch on some of the real power of our platform and the diversity of use cases for it for marketers. Because again, a sophisticated marketer is not just data driven, but they are strategically using data sets, or to put another way, they are using strategic data sets, right? So not all information that a marketer uses is like just a list they get. It might be they go do a bunch of research on a market and come up with 500 companies from reading on the internet for 2 weeks to like really sophisticatedly and as a human looking at this information, identify their market to go after. And then they've got another 2 months, 3 months of trying to find people at those companies to reach them. That concept is a breeze with our platform now, because you can bring anything into it, bring people data, bring company data, and load it up. And you now have a list that then is combinable with any other list you want to build. So if you want to manage your buying personas, your decision committee in our platform as lists, and then you want to bring in company lists from conferences, from previous purchasers, previous purchase behavior, or from like technographic or intent data that your company's buying, bring that stuff in and like it's immediately enriched and ready to go out across all these channels,
and I think this gets us back to a good way to wrap up, but that gets us into what the podcast is going to be about on an ongoing basis, which is this is different the other companies you talked about in the paradigm that you described, like finding decision makers at companies and then going and sort of having sales try to make contact with them and get them aware of your product, ultimately sell them on it. Some of that behavior is exactly the same, but the approach is so different that it turns into this sort of Venn diagram between those human skills and marketing. And it's really like it's marketing is transitioning into being more like inbound demand generation. In a sense, that includes marketing, but also it kind of has these other layers on top of it that are a little more like sales. Like, hey, I want to set up a meeting with you.
Right.
Hey, let's talk about this. Right. But you can execute it at scale. And so you end up having this thing where you're just sort of like, well, we can test if there's any interest around this idea by targeting the marketing departments of 500, app developers. Right. And I just found you a subset of people that might be interested in a particular product. That if you were going to do that with sales, it would just take a long time. You got to cultivate your leads. You have to prospect. You have to, do all that kind of stuff. You can do that behavior with marketing now, but at the scale of big data. And it's just this completely new and sort of exciting thing that we live right at the edge of because we make a tool for it.
I mean, you're totally right about what's going on as like a profession for marketing. And sales and marketing, they're kind of inseparable, even though a lot of people on both sides would say the opposite and be offended by that. But
would prefer to separate them.
The promise, it's important to kind of keep in mind what the like ideal future looks like with this stuff. And it's not like interstitial ads while you're trying to like casually read an article that you like on the internet popping up and blaring in your face with a horn.
No, it's the internet tells me exactly what I want to know when I want to know it, so I can do the things I want to do. And
that's the conversation. If you want to hear about like that sort of strategy, there are a million other podcasts and blogs you can listen to. But the concept here is the promise of data driven means that ultimately you remove the friction, you remove the waste, you remove the annoyances, and you become an educator, which is what any marketer that's listening to this that knows what they're doing, that should be in their job, knows that that's what you do these days, right? In B2B, you're educating people, you're enabling them, you're empowering them, you're leading them to the things they need. You're not just pounding on the door to get them to talk to you, because that doesn't actually sell anything, right? That's wasted ad money. So the promise of data-driven marketing is really the silly cliche from marketing for the last century. Reach the right person in the right place at the right time. But you actually can, you actually kind of can. I mean, it's still not, it'll never be 100%. It's not scientific data like we've mentioned before, but it's really an exciting time for this, right? And once you wrap your head around all the opportunities that bringing data in at the beginning of campaigns and being able to manage this centrally as you're ideating multi-channel campaigns for your company, it changes the whole concept, right? It becomes now, how do I get out messages that are useful to people to the places where they need them, as opposed to how do I get more annoying ads in front of somebody that just pisses them off.
Yeah, and that's partially the reason for things like this podcast is ultimately like it's an ongoing conversation what that future looks like, and it behooves us to talk to people, including our listeners, about what that looks like for them. For data-driven marketers to continue to facilitate that stuff. That like we're just, I'm excited for that. Here's a thing we can wrap up on. What's the first ad you remember seeing in a digital space that you were like, I'm happy I saw that now? I have a very specific. I can think of a very specific one because it was the first time that I went, oh shit, this is how the advertising is going to work. It was like 12 years ago, and we're just barely towing that future now. But I remember very distinctly thinking, "Oh, that's the promise of the internet."
What was the ad?
It was like it was a Thursday night, and Springsteen was in town in LA at a venue blocks from my house, and there were still tickets available. No idea why. And Facebook was like, "There's still tickets if you're free tonight." And I was like, I am absolutely free tonight.
That's a
and I went and saw Springsteen alone in Hollywood on a Thursday night because Facebook was like, "You might enjoy
That's
to do
hilarious.
this."
Yeah, it's a great way to point out also how much stuff in the world, by like a classical sense, is marketing, is sales. Like that's a sales tactic. That was a right. There's something there. Somebody was funding that. There was money being exchanging hands, and
It's not even a new thing. They would have just put it on the radio.
Right. And you get that like in Spotify, right? Artists that you listen, you get alerts when they have new albums and they have concerts in town, and that stuff's great, right? That's data-driven marketing right there, and that's where a lot of this stuff is going. And so the power to do a lot of that stuff is at your fingertips now, and we hope our platform helps enable a bunch of it.
So that's talking our book. If you dig it, check out the platform. Go to netwisedata.com and mash on one of the CTA buttons. We'll get you there. Otherwise, like and subscribe. Do your thing on this podcast if you want to stick around for the rest of the conversation, sponsored by NetWise, that will make up the rest of this podcast. This is the Data Driven Marketer. I'm Adam.
I'm Brian. Thanks for hanging out.